let's begin with the fact that as a guest country, what does Mauritius, which is strategically located, achieve from the summit, and what do you hope to achieve from the summit?
Well, let me first of all thank the government of India and particularly Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji for the invitation. It is, of course, the first time that Mauritius is participating to a G20 Heads of State Summit, and of course it is a great honor and privilege. We are looking forward to constructively engage with G20 members in order to foster global cooperation and see that the challenges that we face, particularly as a small island state, are in fact addressed. I think everyone can draw lessons from the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic that we have been facing, and not only in terms of affecting the health of the population, but its consequences on the world economy. And this has been aggravated now by the conflict in Ukraine. And also we see that climate change, for example, are affecting all countries. So we are at a juncture where I think this summit comes at a very opportune time for us to draw lessons from what has happened, what is happening, and to see how we can work together to make the global economy more resilient, inclusive, and of course sustainable. So this is the approach of Mauritius.
Prime Minister, sir, the fact that African Union to be included as a member of the G20 is an initiative and a proposal that has been put forth by India. What do you have to say? How do you look at the admission, if at all it happens in this summit, of African Union as part of the G20?
I must say I'm very appreciative of the initiative of Prime Minister Modi, because Africa is a huge continent of maybe more than 1.3 billion people, so many countries, and yet we are not part of so many of the groupings. And I think G20, which consists of so many important members and which forms part of major economies where policies are in fact decided, because we know when you have a majority of the major economies getting together, they set normally the trend. And I think Africa has to be part of it in order to be able to voice out the views of not only Africa, but of those whose voices are not normally heard at those instances. So I am obviously very supportive of the fact that this initiative is on the table, and I hope that Africa would eventually become a member.
Personally, as the Prime Minister of Mauritius, do you think you would want to bid as Mauritius as a country to be a member of the G20 separately?
Well, this is an issue that has to be discussed, first of all, at government level. And so we have to take time, and of course we will consider, but as it is today, there is no stand that has been taken with regard to that.
Okay, so we'll wait for a decision from Mauritius. But moving on to the G20 summit itself. Now, India has done and put in a lot of effort. There were more than 200 meetings in over 50 cities. You're here in Delhi, and you'll be seeing the spectacular space that has been created for the leaders at the Bharat Mandapam. But how do you see India's role and India's presidency of the G20?
I must say I'm very pleased to see the initiative that has been taken by India. It has tried to include everybody, and especially when we know that India is playing now a very important role on the international scene. We look at the progress that India has been making, not only in economic terms. Of course, the economy is growing at a fantastic rate, but in terms of improvement and progress in technology, in innovation, now we have to, I seize this opportunity to congratulate again India for the successful mission of Chandrayaan-3. And all this shows that India is making tremendous progress in practically, I would say, all fields. And Sri Narendra Modi himself, when you look at the stature that he has today, has the possibility to influence more in terms of the policies, in terms of the future that will guide us. So I am happy that India has taken this approach that, and in fact is depicted by the theme that one earth, one family, one future, which is of course derived from the Vasudev Kutumbakam, that the whole world is one family. And this is the approach that we should take to see to it that no one is left behind, and that particularly the challenges that we are facing, and I must say that many countries are grappling with the challenges in terms of the effects of, I mentioned before, of the COVID-19, the war in Ukraine. So I think it is important that we get together and that we see India taking this leadership role and also paving the way for a more inclusive global network.
Right. Prime Minister, sir, the fact that Prime Minister Modi has been talking about developing countries and the crisis that now the world faces owing to the Russia-Ukraine war and many other situations, how do you see the G20 really look at the food and energy crisis that faces the world, particularly the developing nations and the global south?
Well, I can speak about what we have gone through recently. You know, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been restriction in terms of movement of the people, lockdown, the closure of borders, and all the other measures that we have taken in order to try to protect the health of the population. And this has had a huge impact on the economic situation. And we are still trying to rebound in order to see how we can go back to a more normal life. But we have suffered a lot. And as I say, this has been compounded by the conflict in Ukraine, where there has been a disruption in the production of commodities, especially for food items, in which Mauritius imports most of its food requirements. So you can imagine how difficult it is, it has been, and it still is for Mauritius to deal with prices of commodities. Government, of course, has acted. We have given huge subsidies, but we can only give subsidies, of course, up to a certain period, and of course, depending also on our resources. So food security is a priority, and I see not only for us as a small island state, but for many countries as well. This is one issue where we need to focus and discuss and see how international institutions also can act and review their regulation so that we have a fairer distribution of food items. Energy is another very important component in which Mauritius has been paying a heavy price because we import all our petroleum products. Prices have been going up, more than up than going down. And we see now that some countries are even restricting the production. In fact, they are decreasing production of petroleum products. Now, this is again compounded by sanctions which are imposed against some countries, namely Russia, which is a major oil exporter. And then there are other countries where there are other issues like Venezuela, Iran. So this situation is, I must say, the least favorable for countries like us to be able to carry on with our development agenda. And therefore, these are the issues that we would, of course, wish to discuss further and see how, we can be supported generally in order that we move and advance in terms of the improvement of standard of living of the people.